Is there smoke? No, we're all right. We're all right.
I don't trust YouTube to actually take us live, but in case we're live, we're on with Sapphire Ed. I'm Wendell from Level 1. It's Sapphire Ed, and
Hey, I think we're live.
let's get this show on the road. Oh, we already don't have any questions. You know, last time we did a live stream, the pre-stream question was, what's your favorite kind of potato chips? Or
That's a good question. That's an important
snack
question.
chips, because does a Dorito count as a potato chip? I don't think it does.
Well, no, it's not potato, it's corn.
Well, everything's corn in America, even except
Yeah.
for corn.
So, favorite potato chip? Munchos.
Never even heard of that.
Oh my God. Okay, I'm just old. That's all I can say. I'm just really old. Had people ask me what my favorite sodas were. Well, when I was growing up, it was Tab and Fresca. Most people don't know what Tab is, so that's
Tab was actually pretty good. We had a Tab and Royal Crown Cola and Mr. Pibb, I think.
Oh yeah, Mr. Pibb.
Oh, ancient. All that food is extinct now. It died. It went under.
Oh Lord. Well, you see, we are getting questions already. Justin's already sent a question.
What's the question?
Actually, Doctor Who sent a question too. Doctor Who asked, "Did we poop today?"
Yes.
That's important. Doctor Who must actually be Barnacles, right? Unlike Jerry, when I poop, I get into it, so I don't take a nap.
It's not good if you spend a lot of time in the bathroom every day. At least that's what they tell me.
If you spend enough time in the bathroom to take a nap, you got a problem.
You're supposed to go in and do your thing, and then that's basically supposed to be it. But I mean, I'm no expert.
Oh my God, they're remembering Jolt Cola. This was before, by the way, for you young whippersnappers, this was before energy drinks.
They used to sell Jolt Cola at computer shows. Computer shows
Yes.
is where you went before there was the internet.
Yes. And Jolt was disgusting. It tasted terrible. But it woke you up. Let's see, what was the other question? How long have I been in the biz? Which part of the biz?
Since always?
Well, let's see. I started computer gaming in 1977. In late early 1990s, I started running tech support for a number of local ISPs when they first started really opening up big. Then eventually, late 1990s, I opened my own computer business, started doing the radio show, did that for like 17 years. I've been with Sapphire almost 6 years.
That's I mean, I always hate questions like that, because it's like, how long have you been in the business? And it's like, you don't understand. Since I can pick up a screwdriver, I've been into computers.
Exactly.
Since computers were like Motorola TTL chips, I've been into computers. So,
right. The funny thing is, you talk about this in the title. It says you had asked a question about your first gaming experience for the discussion starter, your first computer experience. My first computer experience was on a mainframe system called Plato. Now, if you're old enough to remember Plato, you will understand this is not an exaggeration. This was one of the bases of the internet. I was actually online gaming with people in England and South Africa and Australia before anybody had a clue what online was. So yeah, I've been doing this a long time.
that's really nice, because you get a perspective that you otherwise wouldn't get, because you know how the industry has changed and consolidation of players. And I would say that really only the last 5 or 10 years that we've had, except for like maybe processors, we've had so much consolidation that maybe the diversity is not really what it once was. Because I can remember growing up that there was not. Well, I remember like the Amiga or the Amiga users. I don't know how.
Yes, Amiga. Yes.
Yeah. So some of those guys pronounced it Amiga, and I was like, I don't think that's right, but okay. I mean, you're the one that has the ST 4200 or whatever.
There were so many different brands. You look back, Texas Instrument TI 99 4A or whatever it was was the most advanced computer at the time. It was amazing the technology Texas Instrument had put in this chip. Wasn't that the first 8-bit? The first
Yeah.
real 8-bit, I believe. Yeah. But it never took off because it didn't have the marketing that Atari and Commodore had. Or go forward a little bit. Did you ever play with an Atari ST?
Yes. Yeah, the ones the video toaster. The video toaster was mind blowing.
Video toaster was amazing, but the other thing that was amazing from gaming was to use the MIDI ports instead of the network connections. Because network connections back then were a pain in the ass. Okay, Novell, need I say more? And it was just a really big pain in the ass. But MIDI, all MIDI is a transfer of data. It wasn't really music, and it could transfer it asynchronously, just so incredibly fast compared to networking. It was incredible to game on it that way.
The ping time with the MIDI port is 2.
Yeah, but we're back in token ring and stuff. Think about it. Setting up a token ring network to game on. Oh dear God, you gave up 3 weeks of your life just to set it up.
Those were the days. I mean, I can remember doing that with like RS-232 serial ports, where it's like, I want to do deathmatch, like, deathmatch whatever, and it's like, all right, I've got my null modem cable here. Let's get that out. It's like, we got it configured for 57600. Oh wait, Bob, he's only got the 8250 UART. I've got the 16550 UART, but he's dropping bits on his serial. We gotta have to back this off to like 9600 because
when you actually had to have a joystick port.
Yeah. Well, I played. Actually, come to think of it, I guess Doom and Wolfenstein I did play with a Gravis gamepad.
Oh Lord, you're an evil person. Gamepad, you are so evil.
It worked well.
You've lost all your tech creds, man. You played with a gamepad.
It worked really well because you couldn't use the mouse. You had to use. I mean, I could use the keyboard, but I was better with the gamepad.
Wendell, they're asking for your mic to be turned up a little bit.
No. Okay, I could probably do that. I could probably just get closer to the mic. That would probably help it the most.
That would work too.
Okay, I'm closer to the mic now, so maybe that's less terrible.
Well, it's my voice. They don't understand that Wendell's not actually. I'm not actually using a mic. I'm being picked up by Wendell's mic in Kentucky. Ask my wife; she'll tell you it's true.
You do have a very booming voice. It is like looking at the audio panel. It is hard to keep you from redlining.
Sorry, God gave it to me this way. I don't know why. I get up on stage to do presentations and stuff, and they hand me a mic, and I look at them. I said, "You've never heard me speak, have you?"
Oh my goodness! All right, I gave myself a little bit more gain. Hopefully, that's not too much into the red.
Okay, so do we have any specific topics we want to hit? I was going to tell you, I feel kind of like, because of the NVIDIA launch, I feel kind of like the opposition party coming to the mic after the president's done the State of the Union.
Well, I thought that, okay, well, let me go first then, and then that'll give you something to go into. So, yeah, okay. NVIDIA has done the RTX launch, and if you've been living under a rock, my 5-minute take on the see that there's so much information that is just marketing stuff on the RTX, but a lot of channels have done some benchmarks and blah blah blah. But for the stuff that's been added to the silicon, like if you look at the process and you look at the stuff that they've added to the chip, they've added this deep learning stuff which we can't test yet, and they've added all this other stuff that we can't test yet. But the things that we can test, the 2080 is roughly equivalent to an aftermarket 1080 Ti, and the 2080 Ti is a little bit better maybe than the Titan V, but it's got all this extra stuff that maybe will work for some things, but not. The software is not there yet, and then the RTX thing. So I pre-ordered the Founders Edition, and I think I also pre-ordered the MSI version, the Trio, because I was super impressed by the MSI Trio X, whatever. That was the triple fan card, because it was 2 gigahertz out of the box and it was insane. And it's like, all right, NVIDIA's probably got, or MSI's probably got the cooling for this thing figured out, because this much silicon is going to generate a ton of heat. Both of those, and it was like one of the pre-order was actually done via script, and so I am sure that I am like order 1 through 5 on the pre-order as soon as the thing went live. The other one was done manually. And both of those were like, we didn't get anything. This is delayed. We'll get back to you. And so, like as a retail user, it's like, this is not good, not a good situation. But the promise of the future. If there was ever a time to take a chance on launching a new technology, it's now. But it's also really weirdly rushed. And I don't get why it's really weirdly rushed. I think that the pricing is done specifically to get rid of a backlog of 10 series cards. Like, I think there's an over-manufacturing of 10 series cards that are just sitting unsold, and that, NVIDIA is basically demanding that they be sold. And so we will never see good prices on 20 series cards until the 10 series cards are basically gone.
Okay.
So, I don't know.
So you ready for me to jump in now?
Yeah. Sorry. It's like
okay, it's all good. I had a lot of trouble with the launch because pre-ordering hardware that nobody's even testing. Pre-order, my God, that's worked out so well for us as gamers, hasn't it?
Oh yeah, I'm not advocating that anybody pre-order. Like Level 1 should pre-order because we're going to test it and we're not going to get it any other way because we're not going to be influenced by shiny things. But normal people should definitely not pre-order it. And we were exactly right. We were like, you shouldn't pre-order it because these cards are basically tuned to be, and if you pre-ordered like a 2080, I'm sorry, it's not that much better than a 1080 Ti at this point.
Well, you get to we're talk about ray tracing real quick for a minute. I love how NVIDIA has basically reinvented history. It's like they just discovered ray tracing. And those of us who have been around for a long time know this was around 20, 30 years ago. Ray tracing still existed. It's always been the holy grail of gaming, but it's too intense. You just can't do it. Look at what they've got. If you want to ray trace at 1080p at 60 frames per second, maybe, with only partial ray tracing, you got to buy a $1,200 video card.
Yeah.
I don't know about anybody else, but to me that feels like a few steps backwards.
I think the benchmarks that I saw from NVIDIA were like 30 to 45 FPS for like Tomb Raider for the partial ray tracing, which doesn't seem like enough. And also the AI MSAA.
It sounds like neat technology, but we're back to at some point, some companies need to wake up and realize proprietary technology is never good for the industry. It always ends up getting replaced by an open source technology. We always end up with something else that's more open. I actually had somebody say to me today that they were all excited because RTX was going to be a part of DX12. Well, no, it's not. What is it? It's DXR, which is a more open, more full-featured ray tracing implementation is what Microsoft's introducing. But even they understand that nobody can really use it full tilt yet. It's mostly for developers.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's an interesting launch. It's an interesting product. I just am really sad when I watch hype get thrust at things that don't exist. And by the way, here's another thing to consider. You know how they're talking about 4K, 4K, 4K right now? Again, like somebody thinks this is going to revive it. Remember, all that really new technology is only going to be useful at 1080p. So don't rush to buy a 4K monitor just yet. I still think 4K is... I don't think you gain enough from the gaming experience to justify all the other issues it introduces.
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
You got to buy a high-end video card. You're going to lose the ability to have high, consistent frame rates without spending $800, $900 on a video card. I don't think you really get that much greater gaming. You don't get a better gaming experience from it. 1080p is still a standard for a reason. It just games look good and play good.
I am somewhat concerned that with the development machine, I mean, let's face it, NVIDIA is supplying a lot of direct, like real, actual, honest to God, direct game development
Yes.
resources.
Yes.
That's not even anything to do with the graphics card. I mean, a lot of game companies are doing like seriously rock dumb stupid stuff in their games, and it doesn't matter whose card it is. And Nvidia comes in and it's like, let's help you with this, but there's kind of a hidden cost there, I think. And I can't quite put my finger on it, but there's technology, like I look at Hairworks and I look at the stuff with that,
Right.
and the stuff that's gone into that, and I worry that now things like Hairworks are even tied to silicon, because what if somebody like, you remember the AI in Half-Life? It was like, it was shockingly good. It's like the automated players with the MP5s would like sort of try to flank you
Right.
and go around, and it was like when I got to those levels in Half-Life, it was like, whoa, this is the first time enemies haven't been just mindless things trying to kill me. It's like they're actually thinking and they're coordinated, and there's some stuff going on here. I think that it is possible with the deep learning stuff that something like that will exist for video games. And if somebody comes up with like a Half-Life 3 or whatever comes out, it has something like that in it, that will end up being very bad for the gaming community, because stuff like that, like an open source version of that, could right now exist, but nobody's really figured out how to share the load between like AI type workloads on a general purpose GPU and the graphics side of it. And that kind of stuff takes, tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of R&D. And that's the gap that we've got to bridge. And that, honestly, like Valve and companies like that should be working on those types of things. Maybe open source, maybe not. But the platform, the software part of it matters as much as the hardware, I think.
I don't think Valve cares about making video games anymore. They make enough money off Steam. Why should they?
They've got to remember where they came from.
Well, it'd be nice if everybody remembered where they came from, but that's not the industry we're in.
It's definitely not in shareholder interest. I'll give you that.
I mean, look at EA. EA back in the day when EA was first created, for your young whippersnappers that don't remember, when EA was first created, EA was the holy bastion of computer gaming. These were computer gamers that were dedicated to making great games. We had EA, we had SSI. I'm trying to think who else we had at that time. There were like 10 different companies that were all producing. Microsoft, even at that point, was a great developer at that point. And EA's lost its way coming forward. Yeah. They've gone from a company that the gamer is first, everything's first for the gamer, to a company that, well, let's reskin this and people will pay $60.
Yeah.
And then Madden. Did you get to play the new Madden?
No, I'm not Madden. I don't know. I tried to make it through a Super Bowl once with Madden, and it was like.
I came up with the original football game for the PC. The best, I still think to this day, was a game called Front Page Sports Football. And Madden came on to compete with it. Well, Front Page eventually shut down. That was an SSI game. And SSI decided it wanted to get out of the computer market. So Madden took over. But Madden was okay at that point. And it was fun. I like to play in coaching mode. I don't like to be the Twitch gamer that's trying to run the quarterback around and the receiver and figure out where to throw the ball. I just want to call the play. So the new Madden comes out, and I'm like, oh my God, I've been waiting 10 years. It hasn't been on the PC forever. Oh my God, let's get excited. We've got Madden again. And I started playing the game, and the first thing I noticed was, wow, there are a lot of glitches in this game. And it was a bad console port. And what I mean by a bad console port was sometimes you could navigate the menu with a keyboard and mouse. Sometimes just with the keyboard. Sometimes just with certain movement keys. And that's crazy that you should have that level of crap in the design for the interface. If you're going to make a PC game, make a PC game.
That was also really bad. That was like Skyrim. Skyrim had that really bad in the beginning, and then there were mods to fix it.
Yeah, but for EA to do this is just this is one of their premier titles. You've got to put the proper amount of work into a premier title. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and it's Madden, so you would think that that's a premier title, right? I
yeah,
mean,
it should be. It's made them probably more money than anything short of Battlefield. And I would argue it's probably made them more money than Battlefield. It's been around longer.
yeah, I mean that is true. I think that the gaming industry, the gamers in general, having to endure things like that from the gaming industry is it's a tragedy. It really is, because those games could be a lot of fun. Like, you could get a lot of hours out of it, and I think that a lot of games that otherwise probably would have gotten a lot more traction and actually been like a good experience, a good story, good controls, like a something that you remember, and it's like, oh yeah, I played that, and as the story unfolded, I was there, and everything was great. And the optimization is more on, let's get this thing out the door. People are going to buy it anyway, and we don't really care. Like, we don't really care about telling a story or doing anything interesting with this game, technically.
I think one of the comments that was just made here by Stranger, lots of modern games support rendering scaling. You can scale down 4K a bit to balance frame per second and quality. Um, Stranger, what you misunderstood there is games don't scale down from 4K; they scale up from 1080p. I know a lot of game developers. I've known I could do some name dropping, but I won't. Um, all of them tell me the same thing. When they design a video game for the PC, they design it for 1080p. They design it for high detail level, not ultra high detail level. And at 1080p with high detail level is where the game is optimized and designed to create the experience they want you to enjoy. Everything after that is gravy. It's just add-on. That's why I keep telling people, I get so excited about the higher resolutions. The higher resolutions, you don't really gain anything except you put more pixels on the screen and it's smaller.
I
And when
have
you're old,
Well, I have noticed some engines, like the Wolfenstein engine. I haven't looked at it lately, but when the new Wolfenstein came out, I noticed that one of the ways that it dealt with frame scaling was it seemed to be loading different resolution textures. And so, like, whenever I would enter a new area, instead of stuttering, I would just get the polygons and some colors maybe, and then the textures would sort of like it was like an old, like the old school image downloads, like the progressive image downloads on the internet, where it's like you kind of get an image and then it gets a little more high fidelity and a little more high fidelity. It was doing that kind of thing, and I thought that was an interesting feature of the engine. But I was gaming on the Fury X with only 4 gigs of memory, and that was a why, because textures were being paged in and out of the 4 gig, and I thought that was a really interesting feature, that they kept the frame rate, like it always felt responsive, just they were fiddling about with the textures when they
right.
weren't available.
But you're right. This chat's just flowing, man. I can't keep up.
No, there's so many. I think I saw Land OC reviews, and somebody called Austin Evans, which is probably not the Austin Evans, because I'm not. I would be surprised if I'm on his radar. But hey, it's, oh, there's Brad Morris. Brad Morris helps me out with some technical stuff sometimes, so
Okay,
that's a lot of fun.
Daniel E. We need AMD to kick Nvidia in the nuts.
Oh, they're trying. Mr. Meeseeks. If only they had a Meeseeks box.
I'm kind of excited. I want to see what happens next. AMD's really got their crap together with CPUs right now. It's reached the point that if you're going to build a gaming rig, I don't understand why anybody would buy Intel.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I don't know how they did it. I mean, I know how they did it, but it really is mind blowing how good the 2700X is for gaming, but also like the Ryzen 5 and the lower end stuff, or Ryzen plus Vega. I gave I gave a Ryzen 5 plus Vega system to somebody that did not like, the computer that they had was like a dual core something laptop, and they hurt themselves in such a way that they need to work on regaining their fine motor coordination. And so it was
Okay.
like, all right, here's Skyrim, here's a mouse, here's a Vega, a Ryzen 5 plus Vega. Let's see how you're doing with this. And so for their quote unquote physical therapy, they're doing that, and their physical therapist is like, wow, this is actually helping. You're actually, regaining your motor function faster after this than I would have expected, and it's because they're sort of getting sucked into these games. And Ryzen plus Vega was a great low cost way to do that. It was really exciting.
You know what's you're going to make me chase the squirrel now for a moment. Do you know why Solitaire was included in Windows?
Uh, the mouse coordination. It was to teach the
Yes,
people
it
how to
was.
use the mouse and drag and drop and those kind of
Most
operations.
people do not realize that that was actually the case. Here's another old trivia for you. Let's see if you get this one. What's the any key?
Press any key to continue.
Well, no, there actually is an any key, and the any key is the space bar.
Hmm.
And what happened is they wanted you to press any key, but sometimes the inputs wouldn't read correctly back in the old DOS days. And it wasn't as simple as just say anything from the keyboard. It was a little more complicated. The space bar, though, is something everybody hits on a regular basis. So when you'd have programs that wouldn't see any other key, they would always see the space bar.
Hmm.
So this is old time stuff, man. This is you gotta go back to the days when we had to crank up our computers by hand to get them to power up.
I remember the keyboard buffer. It's like I worked on an AT&T system that had like a 32 byte keyboard buffer, and it was like, wow, that's so much better than the other keyboard buffer. That's amazing. It as I recall, that system also had a really interesting feature. If you had a mouse hooked up to it, and it was the AT&T mouse, and you were running a DOS program, but you didn't have a mouse driver loaded, when you move the mouse up and down, left and right, it was like you hit the arrow keys on the keyboard.
Jamie just asked, OS 2 or Windows 3.1? If I had my choice, it would have been OS 2.
OS 2 Warp, though,
Oh,
let's be clear.
oh yeah, it was an incredible operating system, just light years ahead of anything Microsoft was doing. It was Intel, though. Intel's not real good. It doesn't feel like they've ever been real good with anything outside of processors. Is it just me, or have you had that impression as well? I mean, they tried the Starfighter video card. That was a disaster. OS 2 was an amazing operating system, but never got the support it was supposed to get.
Well, OS 2 was more IBM.
Oh, you're right. You're right. I'm sorry. You're right. You're right. I'm old, man. I've forgotten half of this stuff.
But
You guys reminded me as I go.
well, no, Intel was involved, but IBM was more about driving OS 2, and there were some really fringe versions of OS 2. I think there was an IBM machine that had an add-in card. It was like an x86 machine on an add-in card, and you put that in, and OS 2 would run on the x86 add-in card, but it was otherwise hooked up to like an RS-6000 or something, and you could orchestrate jobs on the RS-6000 from OS 2 Warp, even though you weren't, or not OS 2 Warp, it was an older version of OS 2, but from OS 2 running on whatever the add-in card was for like the mainframe. And that was like a normal thing. And so Intel, I think, wanted to get in good with IBM because there was this thread of IBM like bringing PowerPC to the desktop or whatever. It was like, hey, why don't we work with Microsoft and figure out a way to have something that's a little bit more stable than Windows.
You said you did Commodore back in the day.
I did some Commodore Plus 4, Commodore 64. Woo.
GEOS.
No, GEOS. Yeah, I didn't call it GEOS, but
Well, yeah, GEOS is what everybody at the time called it. That was my first desktop publishing was using software in that because it was one of the first. Well, I might be wrong here, but wasn't it the first GUI in the home?
Yes. Well, yes. Yes, it was because there was something about like the 286 or the 386 version. There was a really cheap machine. I think it was designed for the 386, but I think there was a really cheap 286 that was basically sold as like a home appliance. It was like a glorified word processor. Because there was a lot of computer companies that were trying to come out with appliances that were like almost, they wanted an almost like a Mac SE type experience, but for like their suite of stuff. And I think GEOS was one of the companies that got roped into providing some of that. And so I think there's some obscure machine out there that's running that on some unholy processor. But the guy that did Mac started that whole thing with a Canon Cat. So there's a word processor called the Canon Cat that was designed by the guy that did all the Mac stuff, and I've got one in the basement. And the plan was to turn that word processor into a full-fledged computer. There's a mouse port on it and everything,
Nice.
but they just never did the software. And that guy left to go to Apple, and Canon never did it. Never did have anybody to replace him, so it just sort of stayed a word processor.
Okay, well, we're being corrected. We're being told that Jim was the first home GUI.
Oh, okay, yeah. That makes. I remember that. I never got to use any of this stuff. I only got to use whatever you could download from a BBS.
How old is Sapphire Ed? I turned 55 this year. That means that and the realization of this was just huge when I turned 55, and I was talking to somebody about this, and they said, "See, you've been actually computer gaming for 41 years." Yes. They said, "You do realize you've been computer gaming since the beginning of computer gaming." And wow, you just don't, sometimes you don't realize how old you are. And
you haven't lived until you've played Rogue on a teletype.
Oh my God. You haven't programmed until you've done punch cards. or COBOL, or yeah, I used to program back in the day. I used to program in COBOL and Fortran in Forth. Most people there probably have never heard of Forth. Pascal, Tutor, did a lot of. I actually got paid to do DBase and Clipper programming for a while.
Forth was the fourth programming language that came after C, because it was A, B, C, and then Forth, because Ada, and then.
Yeah, okay, very fun. You don't even know what Forth is, do you?
No, Forth is a programming language.
Well, no, Forth is an operating system.
Oh, is it?
Forth is a complete operating system, and what you would do is you would take and pull parts of it out or put parts of it in as you needed to run a program. And the idea behind this was mostly used in the early video games. The boxes in the penny arcades, most of those were written in Forth. And of course, it did. Everything was in reverse Polish notation.
Oh, of course, obviously.
It's just made everything a nightmare. You had to have, your brain had to work a certain way to program in Forth.
I had an HP 48 calculator that had a reverse Polish notation mode, and I remember getting used to it like at the end of one calculus class, and then it was summertime. And at the end of class, I remember thinking, this is amazing. I should have been doing it this way the whole time. And then the next semester started after a summer of not worrying about anything school related. And it was like, how the hell what was going on? And let's just turn this RPN thing off.
I like this. It doesn't get older, he levels up. Yeah, I've hit level 50. I'm in elite status now. Leave me alone. You got to be over level 50 to hurt me anymore. I don't PvP. We need to find some real questions here. We've been rambling, and people have been asking questions, and neither one of us paid attention.
It's an exciting time to be alive for computer hardware. Competition is alive and well again.
Well, competition's alive and well. We're starting to see new technology. Had a real interesting discussion, and you as somebody I'd love to have a discussion with. I'd love me and you, some cigars, some booze in the back porch to have this discussion. We were beginning to plateau, in my opinion, on CPU. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say that is we're to the point that we almost need a truly new architecture. We need to leave x86 behind and move to a truly new architecture. And I can't get people to understand because they say, well, let's do it. It's not that easy because you're going to lose all backward compatibility. You're going to have to write new OSs. You're going to have to write new subroutines. If you want to use the existing software libraries, you're going to have to basically build a huge emulator to be able to do this. We've just kind of reached that point, and I want to know if you feel the same way, where we can't go much further with this. We're about as far as we can go without just saying, blow it all up, let's start again.
I think that's true, and I think in a lot of ways we are already. And one of the ways that x86 is not suitable for graphics cards. And Intel indirectly or directly demonstrated that by building what would become Xeon Phi, which is a cajillion x86 cores on a card, and it wasn't appropriate for a graphics card. I mean, they actually got it to run, I think, Quake, But Quake is an odd case because it came out of the mind of Carmack. So Carmack was doing all this stuff to shortcuts to make it run really well on x86 because Quake. And so it's like, oh, let's build a graphics card around it. But it turns out that the Quake engine was not great for that because Quake was built with x86 in mind. So it's like, you guys shouldn't have done that. And it's like, oops. I'm way oversimplifying, but it turns out that x86 wasn't good on the graphics card side. So with like CUDA cores and OpenCL, we basically are. We basically are at a point where the microarchitecture is way different and actually a lot simpler. And a lot of the problems that you have on x86 with scaling and compute and that kind of thing go away. So I think that we will hit a wall probably around 5 or 6 gigahertz with the current process unless we switch away from silicon to something else. And that's really one of the only ways that x86 would live on. But we will probably see graphics cards approaching 4 gigahertz. I mean, a 4 gigahertz graphics card with a bajillion parallel cores is going to give us the programming that we need for things to run in parallel. And I think that the specialization that we're seeing, if you look at the die shots of Sandy Bridge and then Ivy Bridge and Haswell and Devil's Canyon and Skylake and KB Lake, it looks like a city that's being built out. You can see the old part of the city, and then you can see some new growth, and then you can see a little bit of change in the old part of the city. But if you look at it as if it were a map, it's getting larger and larger and larger and more complicated. And that's not because they're just adding stuff to x86. We've got hardware to H.264. We've got hardware H.265. And it's like, oh, now we've got QuickSync to handle the H.264 stuff instead of the previous hardware acceleration that we had. But that's handled over here on this graphics part, which is totally new country, totally new territory. And so I think Intel saw the writing on the wall, which is why they're marrying, graphics and the chip together. But then they also saw the chiplet writing on the wall, and it's like, guys, we got to put the brakes on integrating it's making the die size too large. We can't do it. And so then you see things like Ryzen or Vega plus Intel x86 cores, which is, I think, Intel's experimenting with chiplets and things like that. And so the new architecture that you're talking about, to come back to that, is going to be, you've got the x86 chiplet, and then you've got something else. And that's something Intel started with Itanium. It's like, we're going to come out with this Itanium architecture, which is totally different, but we've also got the x86 part of it over here that'll be good enough for people that are still running x86, but we'll recompile it and everything will be totally fine with Itanium on this side. And so exactly what you're talking about is already happening in the industry, but it's the inertia of x86 that's keeping us on x86. So we'll always have x86, but we're going to also have other stuff. And that's why NVIDIA is now doing what Intel was doing on the processor. So if you look at RTX, to bring it home, you've got all the standard graphics card stuff, plus all this new stuff on the silicon. And look, NVIDIA has no clue what is going to be there in the future. They've added a little bit of everything just to see what sticks to the wall.
Yeah, well, good luck with that. We'll see how it works. But I don't know. I think we're going to find. I mean, we don't have a 2060 yet to see what it's going to do, or 2070 for that matter. I think you're going to find, though, based on what we're seeing with the 2080 and the 2080 Ti, a lot of this extra stuff isn't going to translate down.
Yeah,
I don't think it's got the horsepower to keep up with it yet.
I don't think it can without the silicon being large and complicated, which is where the costs come from. And so I think we may actually see a transition in the industry. We may not see a 2060. We may see that the 2060 is actually a rebadged 1070 or something like that, where you just don't have those features. And so going forward, you maybe only have 1 or 2 flagship CPUs, and then the next click down is the previous flagship from the prior generation.
Ron is asking, what do you recommend to replace my Asus GeForce GTX 660? Any Sapphire card.
Obviously.
Seriously, I actually, I've been working on a project with this, because you get asked all the time, I'm sure you do too, when should I upgrade? Well, the when you should upgrade is actually really simple. When you need to. People rush out and they upgrade, I think, often too fast. I know that sounds weird. I sell video cards for a living. You'd think, and yes, you should go buy Sapphire cards now, right now. I need more money. But that being said, don't upgrade until you actually need to upgrade. If you've got an older video card or an older CPU and your gaming experience is still fantastic, why would you want the headache?
Yeah.
Why would you want to mess with it? And I'll take that a step further. I think the same applies to drivers and BIOSes. We've got this bad trend in the tech community. A new BIOS comes out for a motherboard, everybody rushes to get it. Those were never designed to be rushed to constantly be upgraded. If you're having an issue, upgrade your BIOS. It may fix it. If you're having no issues, why would you do that?
I want the new Agiza.
There you go. I had two questions caught my eye earlier, and if we'll go back to those real quick. First, I was asked, have I ever used NVIDIA video cards? I've been doing this a long time. Yes, I've used NVIDIA video cards. I was a reviewer for 20 years. I looked at a ton of NVIDIA video cards. They're asking what my experience was. I'm not going to get into that. Because, well, there's a problem here, okay? It's difficult sometimes for people to understand when I'm saying something and when Sapphire is saying something. By the way, most of this discussion has been Ed, not Sapphire. And so I don't want to get into talking about the competitor's products, because if I say something good, somebody will take it wrong. And if I say something bad, I'm biased. So it's better just to not say anything on that matter. The other question that was asked shortly after that was what's in my personal rig. So I guess the question is, do you want to know what's in the personal rig I use or what's in the personal rig I'd build with my own money? Because that's two different things. Well, the computer I use, I've got a 2600X. I've got a Vega 56 in it. Really high-end Asus motherboard. I've got 16 gigs of high-end, the 14 CAS RAM for Ryzen. So I've got a pretty high-end gaming rig that I use, but that's not what I would build. I use this because, gosh, it's free. Okay. AMD sent me a bunch of chips and said, if you want to use them for builds for your demos, okay. Obviously I get the video card I want without having to worry about that. But if I'm going to build a system, one of the demo systems I've got, it's in a, and I've showed it at a few events, it's in a Corsair Crystal 280X. It's a Ryzen 2600, and it's got a Vega 56 in it, but I had it for a while where it only had a 580. That, to me, is a more realistic system for most people. That it's a good, solid system. The 2600 is an amazing CPU for gaming. The 580 or even a Vega 56, to me, that's about as high as I go. I run 3440 by 1440, and I can max out my 75 hertz monitor with ease with that card. So that's kind of the systems I run. I've always been a fan of the mainstream systems. That's what I did in my radio show. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's funny. Here, I'll give you a fun story. And as a reviewer, you'll appreciate this a little bit. So when I was a reviewer, I was always the small guy in the room because I did real radio reviewing. Now, real radio doesn't have what the internet gives us today. You can't get accurate listenership numbers. There's a formula that you use based on market share, size of market, time of day of the week, blah, blah, blah. At our peak, that radio show was hitting about 75,000 listeners a weekend, which is a fantastic number. That's just an amazing number for us to get. I couldn't convince companies, though, that that's what I was getting because I can't prove that. There was no way to prove that.
Yeah.
So I would always get the mainstream stuff, but that's okay. That's where I put my focus. So I would get these middle-of-the-road video cards. So fast forward to today now with the job I have where I deal with reviewers. I love talking to small sites, to people just getting started. I was that guy. I want to help them. You know what I'm saying? It's I want to lift you up because you're hungry still for this. You're going to really do some amazing stuff maybe. So they called me up. They're like, we need a video card. We want to be able to do this. That's awesome. Listen, I got a 570. Let me send it to you. And I get this every time. Well, you know, my audience would really prefer I look at a Vega 64. Where's the reviewers for the mainstream?
Yeah. You know what? You know what's really amazing about the 570 and 580 is that, you know, the 470 and 480, those are old cards, like really, really old, but they have held up well. I think I've got 2 or 3 systems here in the office that have like 7950s and 7970s in them, and those are still great cards. Like there's no reason, like when we have office deathmatch and like people are dying and stuff, it's more than enough to play the games that we're goofing off with at the office. So I mean,
I've got up at my father-in-law's, we call it the Northern Command Center. I've got a gaming rig I built up there. It's one of the early Core i7s, like something like an 850 or something.
mm-hmm.
Was the one right after the triple channel.
Oh yeah, that one was unfortunate. It's okay.
Yeah, but that was the processor, and I've still got a 7850 in it, and that's what I game on at 1080p up there, and I still play the same games I play down here now. And my gaming experience is just as good. It's just a smaller monitor.
Yeah. Yeah.
That whole series, GCN has held up really well. I do think maybe it's time to start moving to a second iteration of it. I think it's time for some changes, but it's actually held up really well when you look at it the way it should be looked at. Is my gameplay amazing? And it is.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. I'm trying to keep up with the chat again.
We had Tim Smith gave us $20 for engagement, and there's no question. So thank you, Tim Smith.
Thank you, Tim.
Mihi of You asks, do you think AMD can implement a form of RTX into their drivers that take advantage of existing async capabilities of their cards? And I would say that AMD cards historically have had much higher raw compute capability, which will only help them.
Yeah. I don't think they're going to need to implement it. I think that the DXR is going to create that. That's kind of the purpose of it being put into DX, is to allow everybody to use it. So if you make a product that's fully DX12 capable, there's going to have to be a level of usage there.
Yeah.
So we're probably going to see that. Yeah, I think you're right, though. When it comes to raw computing power, it feels like every time, and AMD's actually had a better raw computing chip.
Yes. I think also AJC 9988 says Super SIMD is replacing GCN, and there's more to the story than that, actually, and it ties in with your question about replacing x86. So the massive multi-core x86, one of the things that kills your performance is something that happens at a very low level in hardware. It's lock synchronization and coherency synchronization across the different cache units. Like something changes in this, and it's cool if none of that gets written back to main memory right away, but then something on another core needs that memory, and it's like, oh crap, guys, we got to stop and get the stuff in this cache over to that other core's cache. And DirectX 12 and the DirectX 12 like Vulkan API thing is designed in hardware from the ground up to minimize the amount of locking and synchronization that's needed. And it is because they ran into those problems on earlier architectures where locking and synchronization was kind of a thing and it was kind of killing performance. And that is something that will let us scale to 2048, 4096. We already are for OpenCL and CUDA cores, but in terms of having even more functionality in the instruction sets available across thousands of cores on a particular device.
And if you notice my eyes glaze over, that's okay. You know what? When I was young, when I was back in my 20s and 30s, when I was doing this, I overclocked everything. I used to call it tweaking it to death and then step back one. I used to do this. I used to do this all the time. And I used to just dive into this tech, and I've reached the point now. Does it play my games good? Do I enjoy it? Is it for me? A system is this. I hate RGB. I'll admit it. I hate it. Is my
you really like our latest video then?
I'll have to go watch it. Is my system cool? Is it quiet? Is it stable? And if I can play my games where there's no stutter and it meets those three criteria, hallelujah, man, I've got a great system as far as I'm concerned. I don't need the newest technology anymore. I don't need to overclock everything. I don't need to push the. Like I said, I guess I'm getting old. And somebody gave us $50 for cigar and booze.
Thank you, Bretta.
Next time I'm out, I expect a steak dinner for my cut of that. Okay.
I think I think Rain Fox Wolfstone and Something Cantwell have the same question. What do you think of the new RISC-V architecture, especially since NVIDIA used the spec for part of its new GPU? So I have some RISC-V stuff on the way. I've got the RISC-V development kit thingy coming, and we're probably going to do a couple how-to videos on getting Debian up and running on that thing, and like maybe using the PCIe interface card with that. So that's exciting.
Let's see what else we got here. Everybody's asking me about the new stuff. I can't really dive into new stuff. I wish I could. I really do. I wish we had some material that, and I tell you what I will do, Wendell. Here's what I'll do for these people. The minute I am given permission to start giving information, Wendell will be my first call. We'll do a video.
That'd be good. People like it. I mean, we have a lot of people that are building really high, like they do this for a job, and they're building really, really high-end systems. But we've also got a lot of people that are kind of like, I would like a living room home theater PC, but I'm not going to spend thousands of dollars on it. And a 570 on sale plus, like a Ryzen 5 or even a Ryzen 3 is fine, or a Ryzen plus Vega is fine, and I'm going to put it together and just run with it. But I think that if I didn't depend on the software image on my workstation, I would rather upgrade more frequently and not be on the bleeding edge, but just be mainstream and get more and more. Because the mainstream stuff, I mean, it's been that way with like TVs and stuff. It's like, I'm going to buy a $2,000 TV, and it's like, are you crazy? Buy the $500 TV next year. That'll be better than the $2,000 TV this year. So,
well, that's you made me think of something, but then I saw a question here too. Where'd the question go? Hold on, the question scrolled up. Where do I stream nowadays? Jägermeister asked where I stream nowadays. Little quick story on that. I actually quit streaming. I was doing game streaming, and it was never my intention to make it a big deal channel. It was just me having fun with some friends and enjoying the game, right? I have a very competitive personality. So when I start doing stuff like that, I look for growth. I look for things expanding. I want to know I'm doing well. I want that feedback that I'm doing well. And I started looking at other streamers because we'd done okay. We'd started to grow the audience a little bit and everything was going okay. And I started looking at other streamers. Now, remember, I was a professional broadcaster for 20 years. I know how to do this shit.
I'm still learning.
I'm watching.
I'm so awkward.
I'm watching these people do this. And, oh my God, most of these people shouldn't be allowed to have a camera, okay, let alone a mic. They shouldn't be allowed. And the streams had no content. You have a ton of content. You and I have discussed this. You know I like your stream. They had no content. They were all one big fart joke or drunk fest, was the majority of the stream. And I tried to figure out why I couldn't get growth. So we did, Doug was still doing the stream with me. We did a stream where we were going to take a shot of whiskey every time somebody joined the channel. All right. Now, again, I'm a professional. I knew what was coming.
I'm a professional alcoholic, I'll have you know.
No, what we did was, people get mad at me now, get over it, because we didn't want to die of alcohol poisoning. We took a brand new bottle, we dumped most of it into another bottle, and then finished filling it with sweet tea. So that we were still getting drunk, but we just weren't going to get sloppy. We just got a little loose. But then I realized this is what I've got to do to get following. This is what I've got to do to get people interested in watching the show. I've got a little bit of dignity and pride left in my life. And I don't need the followers that bad. It was bad for my health. It was bad for my mentality. It was just, there was nothing good for me about doing this. And I just finally said, screw it. No, I don't need it that bad.
We can be T-Gots, that geek over there.
Okay, there you go.
That's terrible.
There you go. He wants you to reintroduce me. You mean there are people on this planet that don't know who I am yet? I feel heartbroken.
It's Ed from Sapphire.
Ron, catch me on Twitter or Facebook. It's easy enough to message me there.
Literally Google Sapphire Ed.
Yeah, you can find me. I'm out there. Yeah, I need cleavage to succeed. I could have cleavage, but there are some things no one wants to see on a stream. I did dye my hair blue once for the community, Big Daddy. The community, when we hit a certain number, I dyed my hair and my beard blue for 2
The
days.
Pup Shepherd asks, I have Linux, but I never liked the command line was needed to install programs. I don't know, $10? Thank you, Pup Shepherd. I don't think there was a question there, but maybe I misread.
Lee Fall asked, does Sapphire use cheap Chinese caps? That I'm aware of, and I haven't really ever tore apart our low-end brands, but I know all of our gaming models, we use solid capacitor designs.
Yeah, I've been using the Vega 64, the triple slot, and I've done a lot of terrible things to it under Linux, and it's been solid. I mean, it's
Alinsky, Petro, whatever, Alinsky. He gave me my soapbox. I love this soapbox. I love this discussion. Okay, if I may, yes, you may. By the way, Alinsky, Alexandra, whatever it is. Okay, I can't pronounce your name without butchering it, but I acknowledge you. AMD FreeSync is an open standard, yet NVIDIA only recently was able to take advantage of the tech, even then through a hack. What gives? Okay, I don't understand the consumer market sometimes, all right? AMD FreeSync is based off the Adaptive Sync open standard. This standard was developed by VISA, which is the standardization for pretty much everything to do with video. NVIDIA is a major partner of VISA. So NVIDIA was involved in the actual creation of the open standard. In fact, their G-Sync technically uses the same technology. They just use it with a hardware interface. Mm-hmm. Okay? NVIDIA could tomorrow, and I'm not joking about this, the amount of code, and I think Wendell actually hacked it once to show it. The amount of code to do this is tiny. They could tomorrow turn on FreeSync support on every video card they have at no cost to them. Just bang, instantly every video card they had would properly support FreeSync. And they could tomorrow put out a firmware update for every G-Sync monitor to allow it to use FreeSync driver support. It's just amazing to me. Why would you want to buy from a company that says, yeah, we could give you more options, but no?
I think that to me it signals a company that's not confident in their solution. So it's like, G-Sync is this much better than FreeSync, but don't take our word for it. If you want to use a FreeSync monitor, what do we care?
It just, to me, it makes no sense. You got to go back. You've got to be a bit of a historian in the computer world to understand this. So 3D gaming owes itself to a company called 3DFX, which was an amazing company in its day. 3DFX got pretty much drove out of business for two reasons. One, they made a really bad business decision when they bought the fabs. They weren't ready for that. They financially weren't in a position to do that. That was a dumb move. But the other reason that they took a lot of trouble was they focused on Glide, which is a proprietary API. Mm-hmm. DirectX didn't exist at first, and this was the only way to really get. There was a little bit of other 3D stuff. You could do stuff like with Matrox and ATI, but Glide was it. Glide was gaming for 3D. It was incredible. Instead of opening up Glide and making it available so other companies could begin to come in, which would have really, I think, kept them going well, they kept it really closed. Yeah. And eventually that was part of the downfall of 3DFX. We look fast forward to today. I'm going to name some closed technologies, but I'm not trying to pick on the company. I'm trying to make a point. So a company introduced 3D glasses, 3D monitors, closed system, and it died almost instantly. Just did not go over well because there was too much limitation on the control of it. Look at PhysX. PhysX is actually a great physics implementation. Mm-hmm. It really is. It's a wonderful physics implementation, but it has lost to Havoc. Yeah. Because Havoc is open. Havoc works with everything. G-Sync comes out. G-Sync's going to be amazing. G-Sync, and it is. G-Sync is a great product. I don't have a problem with G-Sync. But for $200 to $300 less money, I can get the same thing.
Yeah.
Why do you pay the extra? So they need to get out of that. They need to get out of that closed mentality. I think they really do a disservice to their customers. And yes, by the way, Matrox Mystique was amazing.
Yeah, hardware acceleration. That was, I saved up a bunch of money to buy my it's like a G200, so that I could get like true hardware acceleration graphics, and I was so happy with that graphics card. And it didn't game worth a crap, but I could work on it, and it was like, yeah, a billion windows, ton of monitors, this is great. But the thing with, I mean, like, there are aspects of G-Sync that are different than FreeSync. Like, NVIDIA is not like the $2,000 Asus monitor. It literally does have a $400 FPGA in it. I'm sure Asus is not paying $400 for it, but if I were to go and buy the FPGA at like Mauser Electronics in 1,000 unit quantities, I'm going to be paying $400 for it. And it's doing some stuff, and that's fine. But I think it again is not having confidence in your solution. I think that if G-Sync were that much better, it's different, obviously, but if it were that much better, I think that NVIDIA wouldn't be so hostile to supporting FreeSync. And, you know, in the beginning, you mentioned physics or PhysX. I mean, it's kind of funny, but in the beginning, you could run PhysX on a separate graphics card, and you could have a mixed system with AMD and NVIDIA graphics. And they kneecapped that severely in the driver after a lot of people started doing that. And again, I think that's just not having confidence in your solution, in your system. I think that you have to, it's not just being open, it's being confident in the solution that you have. And it's like, oh, we think there's a competitive advantage here to shorting our customers something and hoping that they don't notice. And I would hope that that behavior is not something they do, not because of, you know, whatever business interests they have, but it is actually in their best interests to not treat customers like that, because eventually customers will get fed up, and that will be the end of it. But they don't really gain anything by behaving that way, I think.
Well, just so people understand, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, you're saying this because you work for an AMD-based company. I will not say that that isn't a small part of the reason I have the position I have. But the other reason for the position is I'm a gamer. So what I don't like about the current technology, and NVIDIA's the worst at this approach, is as a gamer, I sometimes have to look at games I want to buy and make my hardware decision not on its ability to play the game, but if it's compatible to the game. Mm-hmm. Does the feature set properly support it? We got rid of this shit in the DOS days, guys. It used to be, when you go to buy a printer, do you know that you had to buy a word processor that was specifically designed for your printer? Not all word processors supported all printers.
Yeah, the fonts thing.
Yeah, you had the whole fonts thing. You had was the drivers built into the printer or to the word processor or not? Did you have to get them? There wasn't a universal driver set to print back then. So that crap is gone. As a gamer, what I should be able to do is this. I want to play a video game. It doesn't matter what my hardware is. I want to play a video game. And when it comes to choosing hardware, I should choose hardware based on providing the best performance and quality to value, and not have to worry about, does this do everything in the game that I want it to do, or is there a proprietary limitation that makes me go buy something else?
Yeah.
I don't like that approach.
Or is the performance artificially limited because, you know, this reason, that reason, or the other reason?
Right.
So I think it's really interesting. We're also seeing consoles starting to support FreeSync.
Yep.
And getting some you know, and TVs supporting FreeSync. I've been meaning to see if I can get a deal on the Samsung TV that supports FreeSync to give that a try. The Linux kernel 4.20 just finally got good FreeSync support again, so I'm looking forward to being able to do stuff with that on Linux. You had to, prior to 4.20, you had to do unholy things to patch in support, and it was still a little sketchy. But I think that the FreeSync support on Linux will also help drive a good desktop experience, because the compositing pipeline on Linux is a little different. And so, like, using GNOME on Linux, it takes one extra frame, so at 60 hertz, that's an extra 16 milliseconds delay, just to have one extra step in the compositing pipeline for like window transparency and window motion and things like that. And that's actually a problem for gamers because it's not quite as low a level as Windows.
Two quick questions that caught my eye. Here, I'll get this one first because it's in front of me. Ed's PC must have a Vega 64 limited edition in Crossfire. No, it does not. I have a Pulse Vega 56 in my system.
For $400, you can't beat it. It's the deal of the century.
Oh my God, the thing's a beast. No news on Navi. Nothing I can talk about. Let me see. What was the other question? There was another question that really it caught my attention and then it scrolled up. Okay, how does Sapphire? This is an interesting question. How does Sapphire determine when to make a mid-tier, low-profile card? When there's enough demand to justify it. Low-profile video cards have the demand's all but dried up. There just isn't much need anymore. Most average users, forget gamers for a minute, because we'd like to think that as tech enthusiasts that we rule the world. We don't. And we like to think that gamers are all tech enthusiasts. No, they're not. 90% of gamers don't give a crap about tech. And we'd like to think that gamers are all there is in computers. No, they're only, again, a small fraction of the computer world. Most computer users I see today can actually get by with a tablet. Isn't that freaky that we've got to that point? They want to use YouTube, they want to do their email, and they want to maybe watch news on the internet, and that's about it. Facebook, and that's it. They want to yell at somebody about something. That's it. So that demand that used to exist for that mid-range, low-profile card to be able to upgrade that Dell PC that somebody bought, that demand's kind of dried up.
Yeah.
It's just not there anymore. I mean, I know you did a video or two on taking the older PCs and turning them into gaming PCs, but even those, as I recall, most of the ones you were finding weren't low-profile card requirements. They might be small card requirements, but not low-profile.
Yeah, most of those desktops are the low-profile refurb machines are always problematic anyway, just because the power supplies are not designed for even 75-watt graphics cards.
Right.
So it's pretty much an impossible situation.
Let's see what else we got here. We're keeping the audience occupied.
I think it's also worth pointing out that the modern machines have come down in price for the functionality that you get, such that it really makes the refurb, like, you know, if you can get like Skylake as like a refurb, okay, maybe. But some of those older machines, it's really problematic. And you know, a lot of the people that I know, a lot of the people I'm friends with, have some, like, I've helped them with like the dual Xeon builds and other stuff like that we could get a good deal on, and they've got just massive amounts of RAM because they do, you know, software development. My friends are nerds, and there's a couple of them that can't play Monster Hunter World because it uses an instruction set that's not available on these Sandy Bridge Xeons, which is just like, what? How did that? Why is that? And it's actually not in the game; it's in the copy protection.
OG's trying to bait me. You know what? I'm going to take the bait a little bit. Let's take the bait a little bit. Wendell, can I speak about a shortfalling I see in the review community today, and you not take offense?
Sure.
Okay. And thank you, Elksid, for I don't know. Okay, anyway, I don't know how to respond to that. I think that we've gotten too caught up, and again, this is going to sound weird coming from me. We've gotten too caught up in raw performance numbers. Mm-hmm. And we forget that at the end of the day, the technology we have is about what we do with it, not about just how it's like buying a car and focusing on how fast it can do the quarter mile, and that's the only thing you care about. It makes no sense. So when it comes to review sites, I think the review community a little bit has perpetuated this, I actually would be a better word. And the reason I say that is this: when you go to buy a video card, here's what I tell people to look at, okay? forget performance numbers for a minute outside of generalization. Now I'm going to use AMD obviously equivalents, so but it works with everything. So let's say you want to buy a 570. The performance difference between a reference 570 card and a high-end overclocked 570 card is usually only going to be single digits.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a massive performance boost, not as much as you think. Now I'm talking out of the box. I'm not talking about additional overclocking. What you should be focused on is the quality of the build. Is the card well made? Is it cool? Is it quiet? I kind of mentioned this earlier when talking about my PC. You want to focus on, do the fans work good? Are there features that are important? Like we added easy swap out fans to a number of our designs, which is actually a really cool feature to have. These things are more important than the raw numbers, because those raw numbers at the end of the day, yeah, you might get 1 or 2 more frames per second, but seriously, if you're getting 120 frames per second, what's the difference between that and 124? Yeah. And the funny thing is, I did this discussion we were up in Canada at Gaming Garage for CNE, and I'm explaining this to some guy, and he looked at me and he said, well, the only reason you're saying that is because it's going to benefit Sapphire. Thank you. Because what I just said was you should buy the best quality card, and you said the only reason you're saying you should buy the best quality card is because it's going to benefit Sapphire. Obviously, you understand where I'm going with this. It's focus on the quality card. Don't focus on the performance numbers. When you want to look at the performance numbers, look at them within a meaningful framework. Okay? If you're going to run a 4K monitor, obviously, you need monster balls to the walls video if you want to game with it. If you're going to run a 1080p monitor, you know what? Buying a Vega or buying a 1070 or up makes no sense.
Yeah.
You literally spent money that you'll never get the benefit of.
Yeah.
From that. So for 1080p, you buy a 570, you buy a 580, you buy a 1060. No, you don't buy a 1060, but I'm trying to be fair here and not sound biased. Sapphire, you buy a Sapphire. If you're going to go up to 1440p or 3440 by 1440, now the Vega begins to make sense. A 580 can do 1440p. But it's really stretching its legs to do 1440p. You're at the edge of its performance levels. A Vega 56 will rock 1440p all day long. Just do an amazing job. That's what I run on 3440 by 1440. It's the same with all the others. Make sure your purchasing decisions make sense. Focus less on the specific benchmarks. Focus on the quality of the build. Is it just me? It doesn't feel like anybody looks at the quality of the build as much anymore.
The video that we just posted where we basically do a non-RGB build, and I don't know if the joke made it in, but at one point I was like, I could do a custom loop, or I could take that same money and get another 64 gigs of RAM, and then it's like, oh yeah, here's the system with 128 gigs of RAM.
or you could use the money to put a bigger SSD in. You could buy better peripherals. You could buy a higher quality monitor, which between me and you is a better investment than a higher quality video card.
Yeah,
because a good monitor is good for 5 to 7 years on average.
Yeah, I think that a lot, like for just casual people, things like Ryzen plus Vega is also a really, really good choice. I mean, the system that I built, it's shocking how good it was, even with 1080p. I mean, like medium high in most games, medium low in some games, and there's nothing to speak of there. It's 4 cores and a really modest graphics setup, and you've got an upgrade path if you want. You can get something that is going to be butter smooth at higher resolutions, but it really does. You really have to stop and consider, what am I building this system for? What are my goals? Am I somebody who spends 20 hours a week gaming, or is this like an 8-hour a week thing?
Somebody asked a question I don't know the answer to. First video card Sapphire made. I don't know the answer to that. Now I got to go look.
I found a really, really old Sapphire graphics card in the basement. It's like green PCB, and it just says like Sapphire on the silk screen, and that's it.
I know we've been around since 2001, but Yeah, this doesn't. You know what? That's something I'm going to go look up. I'm going to get a hold of some people, and I'm going to find an answer to that, just because I want to know the answer to that. Somebody also asked what I think of VR. I think VR has been overhyped. It kind of like 3D was, but at least it's got more potential. It doesn't look like a digital ViewMaster. And for all of you not old enough to know what a ViewMaster is, Google it. VR, when it's applied to a racing game or a flight or space simulator game, is incredible. And the reason why is it's fully immersive. It makes sense in those games for you to be seated in a chair. It makes sense for you to have a controller in your hands and at your feet that affect how you do things. So I don't understand people that do racing game builds today that build multi-monitor. VR all the way. I would never use multi-monitor in a racing game. When you move out of those games, the game designs fall apart. I think they're neat, but they can't sustain. They don't seem to hold your interest very long. VR is amazing for porn. There's a story, but I'm going to stay out of that one for right now. Oh my God!
For God's sakes, don't threaten our monetization.
Well, no, okay. I'll tell the story. There was a porn star that was actually asked about VR and porn. A producer was asked, and he explained that it was the stupidest thing he'd ever heard of, because it's difficult enough to record porn when you've got 2 or 3 cameras and the cameras are moving in and moving out and everything else. It's difficult enough to keep these people engaged. When you 360 the cameras, he said it becomes weird. And for a porn producer to say it was weird is really strange, okay? Let's see here. 3D porn. I don't want to get addicted. Oh my God. Oh my God. Yeah, there are all sorts of things I've said about porn over the years. If you go back and find my radio show someplace, you'll hear some real doozies. Yes, I've done porn references. I've talked about we've had big discussions about pornography and the internet, and yeah, I'm trying to stay away from that. Because they'll get me down the rabbit hole, guys. I go down the rabbit hole too easy. You guys throw a nut out there or a squirrel out there, and I'm like a dog, squirrel, and I'm off chasing it.
Well, at least it's not a 360 camera down the rabbit hole, because then that would be bad.
Oh, yeah, especially with the way you just said that. There are some things that we do not need to discuss. I'm trying to see here if there's anything.
We will not be following the White Rabbit today.
Loved his. Oh, somebody asked about what I thought about Crossfire. Crossfire, in my opinion, is a waste of money. That's a personal opinion, by the way. Sapphire says you should buy 2 cards. Okay. Crossfire is a waste of money. And the reason I say that is this. Multi-card solutions today make no sense. There is, at 1080p, there is no way you should be able to say you can't afford a good single card solution to play 1080p. At 1440p, there's no way you can say that a $400 video card can play 1440p just fine in a single card solution. When you move up to 4K, like I said, then you get kind of silly, and that's fine. If you want to go that way, go that way. Multi-card solutions add too many variables to go wrong. And you've got some games loved it, some games hated it, some games just wouldn't run with it. It's too much of a mess. Get a good single video card. You'll be happier every time.
Yeah, I really wish that the performance was a little better. The reason a lot of people don't understand, the synchronization problem that I was talking about before, that actually exists across graphics cards as well. And that's one of the reasons why SOI and Crossfire are not as big as they once were. It's hard to get that right in software, the same way that it's hard to get the other kinds of synchronization right for multi-core x86 synchronization, because the hardware, I mean, the thermals are going to be a little bit different. Think about things like the dynamic core clocks, and so like this one's running a little faster than that one just because it's in a slightly different place and it's slightly different silicon. And so all of a sudden you run into a lot of problems in the software. So it's hard to get that right.
And Doctor Who just likes asking me questions just to see if he can get me riled up, doesn't he? I'm not going to answer that. I'm not going to answer. I like my job, and I'm afraid what might happen if I answer that.
7 nanometers it's really exciting, but it almost seems like the power voltage curve is starting to be a little different. Like, we've always had massive reduction in power with the die shrinks, which means that we can dump a little bit more. When you account for the scaling, it's more power per transistor, I guess, or less power. I mean, it's actually less power, but the amount of power relative to the scaling is higher because you can get higher clocks because there's not as much heat being produced from less energy usage, but there's more stuff going into the clock frequency or whatever. So 7 nanometers seems like you can't, like, when you dump that much power into it, you start to have weird electron migration problems or weird thermal problems or weird other problems, and it doesn't seem like it's scaling the way that it has from 22 nanometers to 10 nanometers to whatever.
All right, let's see here. A couple of questions here that are kind of interesting. My computer's not behaving. That never happens to any of you, does it? There's why. Okay. I couldn't figure out why my computer suddenly decided to misbehave. All right, somebody asked me about, would I ever sell Samsung, interesting, or Intel video cards?
Samsung video cards? What?
Look, at the end of the day, I'm a hired gun. Everybody in PR is. You're a hired gun, and you're going to sell for whoever's going to pay your bills. That's just a reality here. And unlike many people, I won't blow sunshine up your guys' butt. Actually, it's smoke up your butt, and I'll tell you the etymology of that if you like, because we actually looked it up one day, and it'll freak you out when you hear what the etymology is. So anyway, I won't blow sunshine up your butt. Part of my job is to do this, and if I got hired by another company to do this, well, of course I would do this. But I'm also a gamer.
Of course, you were hired to blow smoke up. No.
Well, so I always want to look at this as a gamer and try to find what the company I'm working for does to help gamers. When Sapphire offered to hire me, I got really excited because I've always respected their product. And when I got brought on, I got even more excited because they were okay with me being a gamer first and then a Sapphire rep. They were okay with that because they knew they produced a good product that I believed in. But would I work for other companies? Well, of course I'd work for other companies. What do you think of NVIDIA moving to dual axle designs, considering their partners? And here, I'll give you guys a little thing I do at some presentations when we talk about the history of Sapphire. Most people don't realize Sapphire's been a major innovator in this industry for a long time. The first ever HDMI on a consumer level graphics card was on a Sapphire video card. The first ever vapor chamber on any video card
that was big.
Was a Sapphire video card. The first ever out of the box from the factory overclock video card for consumers was a Sapphire video card. The first ever use of large coolers with multiple fans was a Sapphire video card. So when you look at all the designs today and you notice how they're all kind of the same and they all kind of moved in the same direction, you're welcome. And so what do I think of them doing this? They had to do it. Their card produces quite a bit of heat. I think it's kind of funny. Everybody complained about how much power Vega cards drew, and then you look at the 2080 Ti and it draws more power than a Vega 64.
Yeah, there's not anybody freaking out about that yet, and it's like, I want to know what the percentage is. What the driver right now today? What percentage of that silicon is dark? Because it's going to be a big number.
You know what though? It doesn't matter. We get too caught up in this. Okay, so Vega 64, everybody talks about how much power draw it has, right? Do you know gaming on a system I've got with a Vega 64, I've never drawn more than about 420 watts from the wall.
It doesn't need it. It only uses it when it needs it.
Right, but I've never pulled more than that. My Vega 56 system, I never pull 400 watts from the wall. At what point does it not matter? Okay, so instead of 380 watts, it only pulls 300 watts. Oh my God. If you're worried about 80 watts of power because of the cost of 80 watts of power, why did you buy a computer? Did you mortgage your house? Come on.
I want to make sure that when I'm doing my, number of cats per second benchmark, that it's not going to throw a breaker. That's really all. Yeah, most people don't realize when you're playing a game, the CPU usage is all over the place, and that's actually that's actually the source of some benchmarking anomalies. Is that the CPU, like in the normal gaming scenarios, when you've got like an 8 or 10 or 12 or 16 core CPU, the cores are not heavily loaded enough to clock up to their highest frequency, and it takes a while on this time scale for the CPU to go from a lower power state to a higher power state, and that is the cause of has been historically the cause of some stutter and weird stuff like that. But the graphics cards are much more optimized for that same scenario.
Gregory went and looked it up. This is great. So real quick, blowing smoke up your ass. My daughter and I, we go to breakfast every Saturday, and my daughter's got the same sense of humor I do. And we'll say something, and suddenly we're like, what's the etymology of that phrase? Where'd that come from? And we'll look it up and have a discussion in the middle of a restaurant about this. Blowing smoke up your ass comes from, I think it was the mid to late 1800s. There was a theory that tobacco smoke blown up the rectum would revive drowning victims on the verge of death. And believe it or not, they actually had billows at beaches specifically for blowing that smoke up somebody's ass if they were drowning. That's the etymology of it. That's where it came from.
Neat.
Learn all sorts of weird things here with me. With me, you never know. I've got so much useless knowledge.
Yeah, well, you accumulate that over a lifetime of stuff, so it's fine.
Yeah, okay. What happened to the Toxic Design brand? And yes, I noticed you, Cesar. One of the things we tried to do was we wanted to simplify branding for Sapphire. It's confusing. You go to other companies, it really became confusing. So what we've got is we've got basically two brandings we use now. We've got Nitro. Nitro is our premium gaming brand. That's where you're going to get RGB lighting. You're going to get the highest factory overclock. Yes, I know what I just said earlier. You're going to get the highest factory overclock. You're going to get bigger coolers. You're going to have more robust power. You're going to have more overclocking capabilities. Then we've got the Pulse brand. Now, Pulse is, we took everything that was really cool about Nitro as far as how it's built, the black diamond chokes, the solid capacitors, the good quality build, dual ball bearing fans. We took all that and then we grabbed all the fluff and yanked it out. Welcome to Pulse. So it allows you to have a slightly lower cost card, a little smaller card. It may not have as high of a factory overclock. It may not have as powerful of a cooling solution, but it still really does the job well. And so that's why we did this. So Toxic, we had Toxic. We also had another brand called Atomic. These are over-the-top cards. We just haven't had anything that we've gotten excited about going over the top with yet. It's been a while since we've had anything that we really got excited about that with, because it's not just about making it. It's about making it where it really is over the top. And to do that, you increase cost a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, you can really jack up the cost to ridiculous levels. So if we're not going to be able to just go like that, it's no.
It was, it's interesting because the build video that I did was a system like as if it was going to be for Linus Torvalds, and Linus Torvalds wants a computer that is super quiet. He doesn't want to be able to hear the machine that he's using at all. And I wanted to use a Vega graphics card for that build, and it's total, like, if you underclock a Vega, you can totally have a silent Vega, but there aren't really tools for doing that and saving it like in the BIOS or saving it in the UEFI or whatever. And I think that there are a lot of software opportunities like to go over the top, but you're actually going under the top because you don't have to do a totally new bill of materials. You don't have to do a totally new build. You can just reconfigure the thing on the fly, but that's all done in software on Windows, so that's not the best cross-platform solution. I ended up going with the WX7100, the workstation card, because for non-3D workstation loads, it's basically a silent card.
Valley just pointed out something. The higher power isn't just about cost. There's also heat, there's noise, or PSU requirements. Well, PSU requirements, first, back that up. We've already made that clear. Basically, if you've got anything over 550 watts, there's not many single card solutions you can't run okay. If you've got a good quality over 550 watt, let me rephrase that.
This power supply is floating. I don't understand. It's going to float away.
Yeah, heat and noise, I can absolutely understand where you're coming from with this, but those both come back to the quality of the build.
Yep.
If the company has produced a really good cooler, then heat and noise becomes a non-issue. Look at our Fury card. We did the Tri-X Fury. A non-tech reported, and by the way, I know this for a fact. I had the card for a long time. I know people still have the card. It is the quietest high-end card they ever tested. It was so quiet that generation of NVIDIA cards at idle were louder than it was at load. Yeah. Because we produced just an amazing cooling solution for that card. But it was still, by comparative, it was a higher power card. But we managed to keep it cool and quiet. So cool and quiet, you're right. The more power something uses, the more heat it's going to generate. Potentially the more noise it's going to have, but that can be counteracted by the quality of the build. Well, the PSU requirements, they're almost nothing anymore for anybody's card.
With the triple slot Vega 64 that I have with Wattman in Windows, I can slide that down like 10 or 15%, and honestly, I can't tell a difference in gaming at all.
Right.
And at that point, that card is silent. Like, you can't hear it. Like, even at full load, it is not making any noise whatsoever. It's just that doing that is within the the AMD software suite, as opposed to like, set this and forget it, and I'm going to get it on startup and blah, blah, blah.
Now, Valley countered with 550 watts is not trivial in an SFF system. You're absolutely right, and you're wrong at the same time. I actually did an article over on Sapphire Nation on this. In my opinion, there are 3 levels of ITX building. There's mini ITX. Now, this is like, I can't remember what the Antec case is called. There's a little bitty Antec case. You can't even put a video card in it. Basically, it's a giant grill on one side, and it has an external power brick. That, to me, is mini ITX. That is, you can't even get a video card in these. Okay, that's small of small of small. It's like tiny boxes. Sapphire actually used to build a box like this called the Edge. So that's mini ITX. Next up, I think you get, in my opinion, you get what I call ITX. This is a little bigger range. This is like a node. What was the node? The 302 or something like that.
304, I think.
304. This is a case that will fit a pretty decent sized video card. Not a massive one, but a decent sized video card, or even a regular ITX card. And in those cases, getting 450 to 550 watts of power supply is not really hard to do. Yeah. Those are pretty easy to do. And then we have what you call Maxi Itx. Okay, Maxi Itx are these big ITX only motherboard cases. They're basically MATX cases with a smaller motherboard holder. So that there's a level of that. When you get to ITX, especially to the 2 smaller ITX builds, I think people go overboard. They try to get crazy. I saw one YouTuber who was talking about a really small ITX build he did, where he put in an overclocked AMD processor and a 400, and he managed to wedge in a liquid cooling solution, and he put a 1080 ITX video card in this and everything else. And he's talking about running this at 4K. That's kind of approaching 202. Thank you, by the way, or 304. Thank you. The 304 is what I'm thinking of. Um, that to me gets kind of you're kind of getting outside what the idea behind ITX is. ITX is about small, portable, simple form factors. If you're going to build a monster gaming rig, dude, build it right. Take the time and make the build. The little bitty builds for monster rigs, I think people get carried away with it.
We did an Encase M1 build using AMD 60. I think it was a 1700 because of the heat problems, and the thing was all fans and all radiator, and it was still like, oh my gosh, this thing is like you just touch it and it's really hot. It was a fun build. I mean, it was a lot of heat in a very small area. People don't realize that it's hard. I mean, air is not super dense. You gotta really get the air in there, and on days where there's not a lot of humidity in the air, it doesn't carry the heat as well.
Right. Well, it's also about case design and proper airflow. Um, a lot of cases, I hate new case design. Everybody's going the solid front crap.
Yeah.
You've got no air intake, and PSU shrouds. So, okay, so you got a case that's capable of a triple fan front intake, which may make up for the fact it's got a solid front, except that bottom fan is blowing 90% of its air into the PSU area, which doesn't need it because the PSU area has a clean intake capability.
Yeah.
So you just wasted your entire bottom fan. It sometimes I think we get silly with case builds. It's like engineers don't know what really works. Let me see. I was going to say, how long is this supposed to go?
We'll take a couple more questions and then we'll probably call it a day.
Ed, do you want to see AMD re-enter? Well, duh. I'd like to see them re-enter the market as top dog, but personally, top dog to me doesn't mean that much. I prefer that mainstream. I prefer the practical stuff. And remember, when it comes to sales numbers, high end isn't where the bread and butter money is made.
Yeah.
Okay, if you were to compare with any major manufacturer, 570 cards versus Vega, the numbers aren't even. It's night and day different. It's huge, the number differences.
Well, I think the more important thing is to look at what AMD is doing is moving to mainstream. Like 6 and 8 core is much more mainstream than it has ever been. I would say that for regular use, 4 core is still fine, but you can get, the difference between like a 4 core and a 6 core is like $15-$20 US, and you don't have to have anything else really to support it. Not significantly more watts, not significantly better motherboard, not really anything. Significantly better cooling? No, not really. You get a lot bundled with that, and so it takes a little while. The industry has a lot of inertia, but 2 or 3 years from now, 6-8 cores definitely will be inexpensive mainstream, I think. And the same thing is happening with the graphics side of things as well, because the most people don't realize how far graphics cards have come in general in the last 5 or 6 years. There was a really massive sprint where everybody was killing themselves when Polaris came out. The 400 series cards came out, and there's been a little bit of a lull here, but it's still a tremendous amount of progress from like the 290X and the 7950 and the RX 480, RX 470. That is a crazy amount of progress in a very, very short amount of time.
Okay, let me see here. I'm trying to see this. Somebody's asking about motherboards.
Sapphire motherboards once again.
Yeah. The reason Sapphire stopped making motherboards is the market is just it's too ridiculously congested.
I'll go you one better. Motherboards are going away. I mean, not really, obviously, but if you look at Ryzen's a whole system on chip, and
right.
You don't literally. Most of the circuitry on a Ryzen now is to adapt the socket to the other interface. Like your memory controller is on chip, your I/O, at least some of your SATA and your NVMe and all this kind of stuff is on chip. Like ITX motherboards, I could see ITX motherboards that really don't even have a chipset technically. It's just a slot and an onboard USB hub, and you're basically set. Maybe not this generation, maybe another generation or two, but moving all of that silicon onto one chip is where the complexity is going to go, because that means that your motherboard ends up being just a printed circuit board, and that's it. And some capacitors and connectors for things, and that's all you got.
Valley123 just asked a great question. Talked about quality as a deciding factor when buying. How do I, as a consumer, differentiate between good cards and craps solely based on a retail product page? Ignore the retail product page.
Find people like me.
You find people like Wendell. You find people like the guys over at I'll think of it in a minute. Gamers Nexus. They actually do a really good job over there.
Yeah, they do the teardown and the PCB analysis and everything. It is very good.
You want to find... First, never settle for one reviewer, except Wendell. Never settle for one reviewer. You want to find 3 or 4 good reviewers and make sure they're giving you information that you find meaningful. Don't let it be just another benchmark fest. Make them actually dive into the experience of using the card. Find 3 or 4 reviewers you can trust. Once you have that, that's how you make your determination. Now, no 2 reviewers should ever agree if the product production lineups are fairly evenly matched. They're always going to have little discrepancies. If all 3 reviewers agree on a product, well, then that's the product you want. But you get those 3 reviewers, and that'll help you get a good feel for the quality. And once you get that feel, then you're going to be in good shape. Trust the reviewers, but again, be picky about your reviewers. Don't go to a reviewer just because they have a lot of followers. Go to a reviewer because they actually do quality work. They take the time to look at the things that are important to you. And once you find that, you'll be in good shape. and Willie went there. He said we should all go to The Verge.
It's like live and let live. The Verge is. I think that The Verge is taking their lumps.
You know what? I want to applaud you, Wendell, because you didn't jump on the cheap ass clickbait bandwagon of anti-Verge video. I want to applaud you for that. And the reason I hate seeing all these people do it is, look at who did these videos. None of their viewership was ever going to go to The Verge to learn how to build a PC. Okay, by the way, if you're going to The Verge to learn anything about building a PC, why? It was just, I couldn't believe how many people jumped on the bandwagon for this. Yes, it was a crappy video. Let's move on.
It is now a meme. Like, there's no escaping
it. It is. Hey, Wendell, Willie wants us to run for president and VP. Crazier things have happened in this country. I will do that. If Wendell will run, I will run.
If an actor can be the president of the U.S., then sure.
Why can't tech pundits, right? All right, we going to try to do one more, or are we going to call it a night?
Let's do one more. Last question. Make it count.
I'm watching this thing here. Oh, I ain't taking that question. Let's see here.
What was the first game you played, and what was your favorite game?
Oh. Well, the favorite game is really hard to do because there's been so many over the years. The first computer game I ever played, not video game, computer game, I want to make sure this is distinguished, was a game called, and I'm not kidding, Bugs and Drugs. This was on the Play-Doh system. The game was a take on the D&D style gameplay of the era, and it was designed for medical students. So you ran around a hospital, and your weapons were the drugs you could find, and you had to know which drugs to use, which bacteria, the monsters, and virus were the monsters. And I played it because it just looked cool. I wasn't interested in medicine, by the way. I had no interest in medicine. But that was the first computer game I ever played. Favorite computer game? All time or current? That's the kicker. All time or current? So let's do both just to make sure it's done right. My favorite game of all time has got to be Total Annihilation. absolutely loved that game. It was Chris Taylor. By the way, I've known Chris Taylor for years. Great guy, amazing developer, and that game was to me. It redefined the RTS genre. It was just incredible. I know everybody's like, "Oh, but Warcraft was," or no, StarCraft was better. No, it wasn't. Seriously, no, it wasn't. Favorite current game is actually BattleTech.
Hmm.
I'm playing a lot of BattleTech. I really love the game. I can't. If you ever love the MechWarrior series, you got to get BattleTech. It's just a ton of fun. It's a spiritual successor to the old Mech Commander games, but it's turn based.
Hmm.
And I just adore it. I've got way too many hours in it. Too much of my life has been sucked away by it, and I'm probably going to play it some more tonight still, so that's okay. Leisure Suit Larry. I can't believe anybody. So here you go. Fun story. We're just going to extend this out. Who cares? We'll stop tomorrow. Sleeps for wimps. Okay, so Leisure Suit Larry. My gaming community I was doing some streaming, and we wanted to do something goofy and fun. And I saw Leisure Suit Larry had been redubbed, and I'm like, oh my God, this game was so amazing. Leisure Suit Larry. We got to play Leisure Suit Larry.
It was all innuendo.
So I got Leisure Suit Larry. That game wasn't as good as we thought it was. Okay, it's because society changed. Back then, it was edgy. Now it's like lame. I don't know. I was going to get into some descriptions, but I'm gonna stop there. It used to be amazing, and now it's just it's kind of sad.
The Maniac Mansion games, the first Maniac Mansion and the second one survived the test of time much better.
Day of the Tentacle too.
Yeah. That's the second one. The first one was. I don't know what the first game that I played was. The first game that I spent a lot of time with was probably Super Mario Brothers. But I played a lot of a lot of games that I don't even remember what the names of them were. That were from like Byte Magazine, typed into like a Commodore 64. And
oh man, a lot of those.
I want to say there was a version of the Oregon Trail that you typed in, and it was
yes.
Like that was a lot of fun.
And then remember Mule?
Yeah.
Mule was a game. Mule was a game that took up too many hours of my life.
Also, the first game that I got really sucked into was the NetHack, which was a Rogue clone. I played Rogue a little bit on somebody else's system. It was somebody else's setup. But then I got NetHack, and it was like, whoa, this is deep. and then when you die, it's permadeath.
NetHack was deep. I love it. Looking back at it, it's not. But when you had it at the time, it was. I don't know if you ever played the game. There was a game called Rules of Engagement 2. Mm-mm. Was a space big starship simulator, as in big giant warships and stuff. Actually had physics models and everything else in it. It was a really cool game. The game came, remember, this was back in the day when there were actual paper manuals. 318 pages of rules for how to play the game. Just an incredible game. Was a lot of fun to play. I remember, well, gosh, you probably remember when Civ first came out.
I didn't. Yes.
You didn't play Civ?
I didn't play the original Civ. No, I think that my computer history was sort of weird. So I think around the time that Civ came out, there was something about my computer that it didn't like.
The original Shadow Warrior. Oh my God, the new one's fun too. I don't care. You can't play Lo Wang and not have fun.
I played Wolfenstein. I got sucked into Wolfenstein, but I didn't like. I saw Wolfenstein, but I didn't care. And then about 6 months or a year before Doom came out, it was like, well, maybe I should give Wolfenstein a try. And it was like, holy crap, this is amazing. And so I did. I did the thing, and I mailed it off, and I got the version back. And just about the time that I completed Wolfenstein, because it took me a while, Doom came out, and it was like, well, I beat Wolfenstein, and it's like, crap, what am I going to play now? And then it's like, oh, there's a shareware version of this thing called Doom. It's from the same people. And then I downloaded that, and it was like, what is this? This is things have taken a generational leap when I wasn't paying attention. I have no idea how much time there was between Wolfenstein and Doom, but it felt like it was literally just like a week or two later, and then Doom was out, and it was just it was mind blowing, and so
There's quite a bit older people in your group here. I'm watching. Let's see, Populous Masters of Orion, Alpha
Populous.
Centauri. Oh my God, Alpha Centauri was amazing.
I played a lot of Populous. I played a lot of SimCity 2000, not 3000. SimCity 2000, like I played SimCity and it was like okay, but it was kind of crashy and weird. And SimCity, at least on my computer, because my computer was made out of garbage basically. And then SimCity 2000 came out and it was like, oh, this is different and this is nice. And so that I got sucked into that. So that was fun.
Ultima, there you go. There's a real throwback. I tell you another good throwback set. Go look up. They were called the Gold Box Edition. They were done by SSI. They were some of the first Dungeons and Dragons games. Actually Dungeons and Dragons brought to the PC. Just amazing games. Just for the era, they were incredible. Nothing matched them. Alpha Centauri is, as I said, just oh my God, probably the best of the entire Civ series.
I tried to get into Wing Commander, so I got Wing Commander, and I got sucked into it a little bit, and then it was like, I don't know what happened, but I didn't finish it.
And then Descent moved to that space game, and it kind of blew Wing Commander away.
So, Descent was the first game that I discovered that I can projectile vomit. So.
Oh, I almost did. Oh my God, that's funny. That's funny.
Like at that point, I was like, I'm a machine. I can play games. This is totally fine. And I was playing Descent, and I was like, because I really binge things when I get into them. And I was playing Descent, and it's like, something is wrong. I'm going to continue anyway. And then it was like, something is very wrong. It's like, it's probably nothing. And then it was just like, I looked away from the monitor, and it was just like, it was very bad. It was very, very bad.
Somebody said you didn't play D&D?
I did a little. So there was a group at the public library, and I would get sucked into their D&D games, but it was not like a constant thing.
I actually ran a campaign for almost 20 years. Here you go. It's a fun story. When I bought my first copy of Dungeons and Dragons, I actually was in Wisconsin at Gary Gygax's home and bought it for him out of his garage. It was in a Ziploc bag. Wow. I got to know him and Ed Greenwood. I got to spend time. Great people, by the way. I even worked for a while. Gygax introduced another game system called Dangerous Journeys, and I got to help with the development of that. It was an incredible game system, by the way. Just really sad that it never got to take off. Roller Coaster Tycoon, oh my God. Theme Hospital.
It's like, I'm Gary Gygax. I'm pleased to meet you.
No, he was nothing like that. Oh my God, your people. Klingon Academy was good. Anybody out there on the thing play the Starfleet Command series?
No. No.
I was part of a beta test group for the Starfleet Command series called the Inner Circle. And we actually were a closed beta group that were all huge Starfleet Battles players. That's what it was based on. And we actually participated in the design of all 4 of the games.
Did you ever play the Star Trek The Next Generation video game?
Which one? Next Gen.
Yeah. It was the one about the Chodak.
No, I don't believe I ever played that.
That video game, like the plot of that, could have been an episode of the series. It was very, very good. So if you haven't played that, I really wish they do a remastered version or whatever. But there's a talkie version. And so if you have a chance, try to track that down and play that. You could play it. It's only like, it's only like 10 or 15 hours. It's not a lot. It's not a long playthrough.
Takulu, I got to tell you, the new Bard's Tale scares me. You get a game that classic. Remakes scare me when that happens because look what they did to Thief. They took one of the most amazing sneaker games ever made and pretty much ruined it. Gosh, I'm trying to remember some others. Well, Duke Nukem.
Duke Nukem was edgy. Duke Nukem was another one of those games where it's like, this is really edgy, and then they did the remake and like the extended version recently, and it was just garbage.
All right, you know what? We should probably end here because we've been at it 2 hours, dude.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks everybody that donated. It's been awesome again having Sapphire Ed. I'm sure we can do this again in the
And
future.
anytime you want, just let me know.
Looking forward to all that new technology and exciting gaming news, and who knows, maybe maybe something 7 nanometers. I don't know. We'll see you next time.
Take it easy, guys.